1972, a crack commando unit was sent to prison by a military court for a crime they didn't commit. These men promptly escaped from a maximum security stockade to the Los Angeles underground. Today, still wanted by the government, they survive as soldiers of fortune. If you have a problem, if no one else can help, and if you can find them, maybe you can hire the A-Team.
A state is also known as a country, such as the USA or Ireland. We're not talking about subdivisions like Texas or California. A state is defined as having a permanent population on Earth. It also has a defined territory with actual borders. A state has to be recognized by other states, and it has a politically organized territory with an economy that's ruled by an established government. States are sovereign too. That means they're independent from other states. This includes microstates, such as San Marino, which is a state within the state of Italy. Let's hear more from Ethan.
The United Nations was created after World War II by the victors of the war. The United Nations, otherwise known as the UN, discusses international problems, resolves conflicts between countries, authorizes military and peacekeeping actions. The UN can establish a peacekeeping force and ask a country for military support. Since the UN relied on countries' troops, they were very often not enough to keep peace effectively.
The development of states can be traced to the ancient Middle East, in an area known as the Fertile Crescent. Most states evolved in the eastern end of Mesopotamia. The first states to evolve in Mesopotamia were known as city-states. City-states is a sovereign state that comprises a town and the surrounding countryside. Many ethnicities sought to govern themselves without interference so that they could preserve many cultural characteristics. This is what created a nation-state. A nation-state is a territory that corresponds to that occupied by a particular ethnicity. Self-determination is the concept that ethnicities have the right to govern themselves. This played a huge role in Canada when the Quebecois created the state of Quebec, due to the fact that they spoke different languages and they wanted their own set of laws.
Multi-ethnic state is a state that contains more than one ethnicity. An example of this is the United States of America. Organizing Earth into nation-states is a recent concept. Other methods of controlling territory prevailed in the past. Organizing Earth into nation-states is a recent concept. All other ways of controlling territory only prevailed in the past. A multinational state is a country that contains more than one ethnicity, with traditions of self-determination. Self-determination is the concept that ethnicities have the right to govern themselves. Nearly all its inhabitants speak Danish. Its history stretches back 1,000 years. Slovenia is a good example of a nation-state, as Slovenians account for 83% of the population and nearly 2 million of the world's Slovenians.
In the present day, ethnic background is important again, and we see the resurgence of people taking pride, especially in the instance that Europe now creates nation-states. The fall of the sweet Soviet Union has made ethnic diversity resurge, and they oppress such behavior, leading to the creation of more nation-states among ethnic majorities, while concurrently outcasting them as minorities in multicultural states such as the US or the UK.
After the end of the Second World War, the Allied powers, including the Soviet Union, came out on top. But after 1991, the Soviet Union fell, dividing up into 5 groups. being Russia, the Baltic region, the European states, the Central Asian states, along with the Caucasus Mountain region. Russia still remains to be the largest country of today. The Baltic states, which can include Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. The European states, which can include Belarus, Ukraine, and Moldova. Followed by the Central Asian states with Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Turkmenistan. The Caucasus region, which can include the Georgian, Armenian, and Azerbaijan regions. Russia, being one of the largest multi-ethnic states, has quite a bit of a challenge, trying not to erupt in a civil war whilst also pleasing all the smaller ethnicities. Russia is one of the largest examples of this. The largest percentage is the Russians and Ukrainians scattered throughout the western part of Russia along to the Chinese border to the west and south. The second largest, of course, being the Caucasus between the Volga River and the Caucasus Mountain region with the Caucasus people of Georgians, Czech, Ingush, and so on and so forth. Smaller ethnicities are scattered throughout the Siberian area, along with small Eskimos, the Siberian people, and other Ukrilik and Arctic peoples. The Caucasus Mountain region is a region comprised of 3 states, Azerbaijan, Georgia, and Armenia, which somewhat live in harmony. Georgia, however, currently has 2 open, vying independent states. The state comprised of the ethnicity of the Oztec and states comprised of the Azerbaijan. Those states are currently vying for independence, but independence is yet to come. The world in 1914 was full of many European and some Asian powers believing in the colonialist ideology. The United Kingdom and France being the largest one, the United Kingdom having many territories such as Australia, India, most of Africa, and Canada, while French having most of Africa as well, and French Indochina, which would later become Vietnam and start the Vietnamese War. The United States as well wanted to get in some of that colonial action and colonize the Philippines from the Spanish, along with the Puerto Rican island. Russia being the largest state at the time, via only in its continental power, followed by smaller empires such as the German Empire, Ottoman Empire, Austro-Hungarian Empire, and so on and so forth.
Boundaries can cause lots of problems because they're just invisible lines that separate a state from its neighbors. They used to be frontiers, but they've been replaced by physical and cultural boundaries. The physical boundaries are deserts, mountains, and waters. However, cultural boundaries are either geometric or ethnic. There's also the law of the sea, which standardized territorial limits at 12 nautical miles. This is where states can set their own passage laws. Because of this law, states have the right to any fish or marine life within 200 nautical miles. Starting at the shore in internal waters, foreign vessels have no right of passage. The contiguous zone is where states enforce laws about immigration, taxes, and pollution. But there's no state control in international waters. If there's a problem between states, they can be taken to the International Court of Justice. Geometric boundaries are just simple straight lines, like the line between Chad and Libya, but ethnic boundaries are formed because of ethnic differences, like language and religion. When the British partitioned India into 2 states on religion, they formed an ethnic boundary. Ethnic boundaries are formed in Europe too, around distinct languages.
The shape of a state really affects the way it relates with the rest of the world. There are 5 basic shape types. Compact, which are efficient. Elongated, which can be isolated. Corrupted, meaning they have a large projected extension. These states are formed to facilitate access to resources or prevent border sharing. Perforated states, states that completely surround another state. This makes the states inside them very dependent. And then fragmented states, which are a real problem because of lack of unity and communication. Of course, there are landlocked states too.
The Cold War was a period of time in recent human history that was quite complicated, with many proxy wars held between the 2 superpowers, the USSR and the Soviet Union. The conflict in Europe at this time was almost at its peak, with the most conflict being seen in East Germany and the city of Berlin, When the Soviet Union blocked trade between the two countries, the Berlin Airlift was the first success. After that, the Soviets responded with the Berlin Wall. NATO was founded in 1949 as a response to the Soviet Union's ever-growing power in the Eastern Bloc. So, in response to this, the Warsaw Pact was founded in 1955 to show and strengthen its unity between its communist members. The Cuban Missile Crisis was a time period in which the world almost saw total nuclear annihilation, with the Soviet secretly shipping missiles to the island of Cuba after its recent communist regime revolution. JFK's response to this was to arm the missiles that were held in NATO-occupied Turkey, but JFK and Nikita Khrushchev came to alliance and called each other personally at the White House in Kremlin, whilst Fidel Castro started to lose its relations with the Soviet Union, ending the Cuban Missile Crisis.
The days of hiding in bunkers are over, and now the reparations of the war are astronomically high.
Boundaries within the EU have become less of a politically enforced threshold, such as the Mexican-American border, which has very strong laws against crossing and very strong or very rare exceptions within crossing the two. But it's became much more of a cultural boundary between any given nation in the EU, more alike to the state boundaries in the US. One major cultural differentiation among the EU is the language barrier. Despite English being fairly universal among all the countries, the Union spends a lot to translate documents and legal forms between languages, considering that there's so many in such a given area. The Union, or the barrier, is a large portion of the cultural integration within the EU. Some states within Europe also fear that a change in immigration policies may blend out a homogeneous cultural identity. The OAS, the Organization of American States, include all states of the Western Hemisphere, and however, Cuba has been suspended of most activities within the OAS. The AU, not EU, is the African Union, including 53 African countries. It has replaced the previous organization, the Organization of African Unity, very similar name, seeking to end apartheid and colonialism within Africa and emphasize economic integration in Africa. The Commonwealth, more popular for relation to Britain, consists of countries that were formerly British colonies. 52 countries, including Australia, Bangladesh, Pakistan, Canada, and Nigeria, are part of the Commonwealth. The rest of the Commonwealth states are African states or certain island states.
The organization Al-Qaeda was founded by Osama bin Laden, the person responsible for the World Trade Center attack. Al-Qaeda is not a single unified organization, and we don't know how many members are involved, but Al-Qaeda have been responsible for many terrorist attacks around the world.
One thing that affects alliances is terrorism. It's different than other forms of violence because it targets ordinary people, like you and me, instead of political leaders. The whole mindset of terrorism is to intimidate a government like a bully would do, using violence in hopes of coercing a government to meet its demands. There have been many recent attacks on America, but we stand united. We remain strong, and we will never forget.
The days of hiding in bunkers